Welcome back to part 2 of my instructional series on FoamCore inserts. This is the second video, so if you haven't seen the first one, do go back and check it out. This one I'm calling Know Thy Game. So the important thing, I guess, when you're making an insert, and the first step you should think about, is what you actually want the insert to do for you. So it's all very well to make a fancy insert, but if it actually causes you to take more time to set the game up, then in my eyes, that's an insert that's completely failed in its point. So for my mind, an insert should help you get the game to the table more often, and it should help you, when you do get the game to the table, get it set up faster. And part of that is also packing it up, making it easier to pack up as well. So in order to be able to do that, you have to understand the different components of the game and how they actually are going to be used when you're playing. So as you see, I've got the game here. You'll need a couple of scraps of FoamCore just to help you when you're sort of portioning out where you're going to put things. And I also normally have access to a bit of paper and a pencil just so I can sketch down. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the components out of the box, and we're going to have a look at just how this game goes together. So this is the base game as well as the expansion. So straight away we can see that we've got some manuals, and they're going to need to sit on top. We've got boards. We've got one board that's the full size of the box, and so really that will probably have to sit on the top as a lid, so the insert will go beneath. But then we've got smaller boards that don't take up the full size of the box. So we've got, this is the expansion board, and so this doesn't take up the whole box. Even, well, if you fold it, it doesn't fit in the box at all, so don't do that. So this takes up, I don't know, about 2/3 of the box. And then we've got the player boards, which are very thin, but they are also smaller than the box. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to fit those in. So that's the first thing to note as we go. I have these bags for the different tokens that come out during the game. This is definitely helps, makes things easier. So this is easy. We can just make a space for these to sit in, and they're right to go as they are. There's player components for 4 players, 4 colors. And there's actually more than that. There's actually these ones which came with the expansion as well. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly have a look at one bag. So for this game, each color has a deck of cards, has a set of building tiles, has that's the bit that sits on the player board to determine the number of players, and then we've just got a whole mess of tokens. So I include coins in mine for each player. That's how much money everybody gets, and then it's varied by the player order. And this is an extra thing that comes with the expansion as well. So for each player, what I would normally do is have a separate box, and all their components would be in that box. Sometimes with certain games you have to think about, are the pieces, when they're sitting on the table, is it important that they're organized in a particular way to make it easier to play? Do you need certain tokens in certain spots? Now, with this game, pretty much all of this stuff that you get out of the box sits on the board. All of the wooden pieces do, and on here. So, you know, you've got discs sitting on the disc spaces. You've got the houses or the depots sit down here, and there's a cube over here. So really, the composition of the box for the player pieces is not going to be hugely important. You're going to need to be able to see all these tiles as you play, so they're going to need to be laid out on the table anyway. The deck of cards is going to have to be easily accessible because you're going to be shuffling it and drawing from it all the time. So essentially, for the player pieces, we can probably just get away with a simple box for each colour. But we'll look into that as we go, depending on how we're going to fit it into the actual box itself. So we'll just move those out of the way and try not to spill them on the floor. Beyond that, we have coins and these little ×2 draw and discard markers, coins in 2 denominations. Depending upon how you would want to do it, you can just, again, have these in a box and dump them on the table when you need, and just pull from them when you need them. I intend to make a little tray to sit these in on the table so that they're kept a bit neater. So we'll have a separate compartment for 1s, 5s, and for these. I don't intend to probably use these coins in the long term. I've got poker chips coming that I'll probably use instead of these when I play the game in the future. But for now, we'll make a box just to show you how to do it, and it'll be nice and neat and useful to use in the meantime. And there's two decks of cards. So there's the cattle deck. Cattle deck, which is going to be all the cows that are going to be shuffled and drawn from to form the market throughout the game. And then there's also the personal goal cards that are also going to be drawn from throughout the game. So again, this is coming down to understanding how these components are going to be used. So the coins and the tokens you're going to need access to on the table, and if you can help yourself to make those easier to draw from, all the better. These decks are going to be sitting on the table and they're going to be drawn from throughout the game. So it's possible that we could make a card caddy to hold these, and so then we can just essentially take it out of the box and set it on the table, and we're basically ready to go. We draw from the card caddy and just lay the cards out. I tend to try and do that with when I have card games, or when I have cards in games, if they're cards that are continuously being drawn from. If you can have something that holds the decks together and just makes it easy to just pull cards off the top, it helps to keep it neat. So we'll probably try and do that as well. And then beyond that, the only other thing really left in the box, well, there's a score sheet, which will probably, I think we'll probably try and just have it sitting in the same space that holds these bags, because that'll be a large enough space to hold it. And the only other thing are these station tokens and whatever they call these from the expansion, and the neutral buildings. Now, all of these are basically going to be taken out of the box and immediately put on the board during setup. So the only thing we need for these is for them to be tidy and easy to get out. Well, there's that for the employee market as well. That's fine, we can fit that in easily. So what I sort of foresee for these is having the neutral buildings sort of together in a little slot that you can just pull out, shuffle, and then just lay them out. And the same for these, just have a small slot that can accommodate all these tiles together in a bundle. Just sort of in a slot in the box, and just have the tops of them protruding out, so you can just pull them out and then just shuffle them up and stick them out on the board. These, if there was more of these tiles than just, I don't know, 10, which is roughly what that is, I would probably put them in a drawstring bag, because I find if you're randomizing tokens, especially if they're small fiddly ones like this, throw them in a bag, shuffle them up, draw them out one at a time. That's much quicker. But in this case, these are pretty easy to manage. I don't think that they're going to be too challenging to just have them be able to be pulled out and shuffled up. All right, so that's sort of the general scope of what I want to do with this insert. So we're going to have separate boxes for the player pieces. We're going to have a card caddy and a tray for the common resources during the game. And then we're going to have some sort of sized spaces for the tiles to sit in, which are going to be pulled out and put on the board. And then we're just going to have a big open hole to fit the bags and the score sheet in. All right, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so now that we've thought about all of that, we're going to bring the box into frame. And the first thing that you should do when you do this is take whatever the company tells you is an insert and burn it and laugh. Because goodness me. Oh, that's my misprinted tile that I got replaced. Okay, that's fine. Don't need that either. All right. Yeah, you've got to remember a lot of companies, the only reason they include anything in the box at all is to make sure that the components don't get damaged as you get the game. Once you've got the game, most of them couldn't care less if it's easy for you to set up or not. Some of them do, and some of them put some effort in, and you get nice vacuum formed plastic or game trays or things like that. But most of the time it's just a folded piece of cardboard, and it's painful to try and use. All right, so here's our box. Here's our empty box. So what we're going to look at now is how much space do we actually have within the volume of the box to fit the pieces in a logical and reasonable way. What we're going to get to now is probably sort of the basic way to build an insert, or the most core, simple way to start an insert, is to line the box with FoamCore. Basically make a slightly smaller box than this box, which has a base and 4 sides. And that then gives you a solid foundation with which you can then attach everything else to. Cardboard, these cardboard walls of this box are not very strong, and as you can see, they're flexible, quite flexible, much more flexible than FoamCore is. But also, if you've got loose boxes sitting in here, they tend to slide around and jiggle and bump against each other, and they'll damage themselves. I have made inserts like that. If space is absolutely at a premium and I do not have any room for anything else, I will do that. But if I can avoid it, I won't, because the box will hold together and the pieces will sit better. And if you're like me and you store your boxes on their side, you want everything to fit tightly, because if you don't, you turn it on its side, everything falls out, and then there's no point in even having an insert in the first place. So we've already said that the first thing that's going to happen, or rather on top of the box, we're going to have the board and the manuals. And so we'll sit those in first. And so this, if you imagine, this will be sitting on top. So this is the height that we have to work with, okay? Now, if we're going to have a full-size tray lining the box and up the sides, we're then going to have another layer of FoamCore sitting on top of that. That's going to be the bottom. And so this is the height we have to work with. So if we then have player trays, those trays will also have to have a base. So then we're going to have another layer, right? So you can see that the depth that we have to work with is diminishing as we think about what we're going to be doing. So we've got, as we said before, we've got cards and buildings. What we might also just think about at this moment is how big is this board? Because this is going to have to sit to one side, and there's going to be a gap. So what I'm envisaging is, because of the thickness of this board, we'll have to have pieces that are keyed up so this can sit in, doesn't slide around. And so we're going to have something that this sits against, and then one half of the insert, or 2/3 of the insert, will be slightly lower. But so in terms of the width, have a look at these cards. Yeah, okay, that should work. So again, if we've got a tray, we've got, well, if I'm the way I'm just spitballing it right now, is if we have 4 player trays sitting along here, boom, 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 then we're going to have a piece at the bottom and then a box around the outsides of the trays. So that will therefore be two layers of FoamCore, one on each end of the box. So that'll sit like that. If we just mock it up, and then the cards will go there, and so that just will fit. It'll be tight, but it will fit. All right, so that's good. That gives us a little bit of extra depth for the player trays. Okay, so we'll assume then, so we're going to just quickly do a sketch. I'm going to sketch out a quick picture of the box. That's a really square box, good job. All right, and so on one side we're going to have four player trays that are going to sit like that. And we'll figure out the logistics of how we're actually going to fit the pieces into those boxes, but there should be enough space. We'll verify that later, that there should be enough space. All right, so that's half the box, and then in the other half of the box, we're going to have a card caddy, and the card caddy would probably be best to have cards sitting next to each other, something like that. So there's plenty of room for that. Now that doesn't need, actually, that's going to be, again, 2 layers of FoamCore. So if we sit that like that, 2 layers of FoamCore. So there's actually enough height to then sit something else on top of that, and there's probably enough room to just have the coin tray sitting immediately on top of that. So you would be able to pull both of those out one after the other, have them sitting in their own little compartment. So we can sketch in a space there, and so that would be split in half, and we'd have cards there and cards there, and then sitting on top of that, wow, that's square, is a 3-compartment tray that will have coins and those weirdly shaped flat-ended tokens. That'll sit on top of that. All right. As you can see, artistic ability is very key to making insets. Just waiting for a snicker from my wife on the other side of the room. Then, thank you, hon. And then basically we've got a huge portion of the box, this massive portion of the box here, to fit these tokens into a little set slot, and the bags, and that's basically it. As long as I don't think we're going to be able to fit these tiles from the expansion into each of the player trays. We're not going to have room. So if these can just sit in this space with the bags, then that will be, I think that'll be okay. All right, so that's going to be our basic structure. We're going to have we're going to make a box. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a box that fits inside this box, and I'll actually be measuring that up and writing down the dimensions. So we'll do a full-size base, and then we'll do the 4 walls. Those walls will need to be keyed due to this board having to sit on one side. So we'll get to that. Then we're going to have a central partition that runs down the middle here, or to one side, and then we're going to have 4 trays that sit over here with the player pieces. And then on this side, we'll have another partition with a card caddy that comes out and a coin tray that sits on top of that. And then basically it's just going to be a big hole over here to fit all the other stuff in with something to sit these tiles in. Those will have to be flush with the top, because otherwise they will fly out. Right, so that's sort of, and that's the sort of process when you're starting to think about what you want to do with your insert and how you want to organize the box. This is the first step that I will always do. So I want to play the game a couple of times first. There's no point in buying a game and then immediately trying to build an insert for it. You want to understand how the game functions and what the parts do and how they interact with each other during play. But then once you've gotten that, you head around that, sit down, try and fit the pieces into the box, and yeah, you just want to make sure that you leave yourself enough room that when you start cutting things and fitting things into the box, you're not running out of space, because that can be frustrating. So I hope you found that helpful. We'll call that one there. Next time we'll actually start cutting and gluing and forming up some things to put in this box. But for now, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.